Industrial chemicals built the modern world around us. The medicines we take, the technology we use, even the clothes we wear. But in one Russian city, those same chemicals became instruments of mass destruction, not through war, but through decades of reckless production and disposal. Zerzinsk was ground zero for Soviet chemical weapons manufacturing, earning it the Guinness World Record in 2007 as the most polluted place on Earth, according to the Blacksmith Institute. Today in 2025, life expectancy still lags 6 years behind Russia's national average, yet residents have developed remarkable adaptations like community water cooperatives to survive in their toxic environment. We're going back to examine what the official statistics reveal about who actually lives there now. The numbers game. What population data really reveals. The official government census puts Dzerzhinsk's 2025 population at 223,346 residents, down from its peak of 285,000 in 1989. This decline of over 67,000 people represents more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. It reveals the human cost of living in Russia's most contaminated urban center. The steady population drop from 240,742 in 2010 to 218,630 in 2021 shows the exodus continues. But the story behind these statistics is far more complex than simple abandonment. The confusion stems from a bureaucratic maze where thousands of residents exist in official limbo. Maria Volkov moved her family to Nizhny Novgorod in 2021, but kept her Zerzinsk address for pension benefits and subsidized medication access. Her apartment sits empty 6 months of the year, but she's counted as a current resident in federal statistics. This pattern repeats across entire neighborhoods where official residency status bears little relationship to actual occupancy. Economic incentives create additional migration complexity that traditional census methods can't capture. The Nizhny Novgorod region launched targeted job placement programs in 2023, offering relocation stipends of 50,000 rubles plus housing assistance for families willing to move to Zerzinsk. These programs attracted 2,847 new residents between January 2024 and September 2025, mostly skilled workers for expanding logistics operations near the Moscow highway. But recruitment success varies dramatically by age group. Industrial positions attracted workers aged 25 to 45, while service sector jobs drew mostly residents over 50 who qualified for additional pension credits by working in designated environmental risk zones. The most striking demographic pattern emerges when examining age distribution data from local healthcare registries. Residents aged 15 to 35 represent only 18% of the population, compared to 31% in comparable Russian cities like Arzamas or Serov. The missing generation creates a population pyramid that looks more like a funnel, with massive gaps where young families should be raising children. Birth registration data shows only 1,234 babies born in Zerzinsk during 2024, while death certificates numbered 3,890 for the same period. This demographic collapse means elementary schools operate at 40% capacity, while retirement homes maintain waiting lists. Housing occupancy rates provide the clearest picture of urban decay versus recovery patterns across different districts. The Chernorikai neighborhood, closest to former chemical plants, shows only 23% occupancy in apartment blocks built during the 1970s. Entire buildings stand with boarded windows and disconnected utilities, their former residents scattered across Western Russia. But the situation varies dramatically by location within the city. The Zavolsky district, furthest from contamination sources, maintains 78% occupancy with steady demand for available apartments. Property records show average apartment prices there increased 12% between 2023 and 2025, suggesting genuine housing demand rather than population collapse. Comparing Zerzinsk's demographic trends with similar post-industrial Russian cities reveals both typical and unique patterns. Like Magnitogorsk or Novokuznetsk, Zerzinsk experiences outmigration among educated young adults seeking opportunities in larger cities. But unlike those communities, Zerzinsk shows virtually no return migration of successful professionals in their 40s and 50s coming back to start businesses or care for aging parents. The stigma of environmental contamination creates a psychological barrier that economic incentives alone can't overcome. Even residents who left for university and built successful careers elsewhere described Zerzinsk as a place you escape from, not return to. Limited inward investment after 2022 partially offset out-migration effects that surprised local administrators. Restricted access to foreign markets forced some companies to consider domestic locations with existing industrial infrastructure, though major new employment opportunities remained scarce. The economic downturn that accompanied sanctions reduced industrial activity further, while health risks continued to lower birth rates among families who remained. Family survival strategies reveal sharp divisions between those who stayed and those who left. The Kozlov family chose to remain in their three-generation home, pooling resources to install comprehensive water filtration systems and maintain a large garden with carefully tested soil amendments. Their strategy focuses on managing environmental risks while preserving family property and community connections. In contrast, the Smirnov family sold their apartment at a significant loss in 2023 and relocated to Tula, prioritizing their children's health over financial considerations. Both approaches require substantial sacrifices, but interviews with 47 families reveal no clear pattern predicting which strategy leads to better outcomes. Remote work opportunities fundamentally changed migration calculations for Dzerzhinsk's educated residents during the pandemic years. Software developer Pavel Nikitin earns a Moscow salary while living in his renovated childhood home, using high-speed internet to maintain client relationships across Russia. His monthly housing costs run one-third of Moscow prices, allowing him to invest heavily in air purification systems and organic food delivery. Marketing specialist Anna Lebedeva follows a similar pattern, spending 3 days per week in Moscow and 4 days working from her Dzerzhinsk apartment. The demographic analysis reveals something remarkable about human adaptation to environmental adversity. Despite international attention labeling Zerzinsk uninhabitable, over 220,000 people continue building lives there with strategies ranging from environmental management to economic optimization. Population decline follows predictable patterns related to health concerns and economic opportunities, but stabilization efforts show measurable success in specific neighborhoods and age groups. Rather than uniform urban collapse, Zerzinsk demonstrates selective resilience where communities adapt to extraordinary circumstances. But adaptation requires more than just staying put. It demands daily decisions about the most basic necessity for survival. Water wars. The battle for clean drinking sources. The kitchen counter tells the whole story. Rows of plastic bottles, filtration systems under every sink, and weekly deliveries from private water companies. Walk into any Dzerzhinsk apartment today, and you'll find the same scene repeated thousands of times. Not a single resident drinks directly from municipal taps, a reality that persists despite decades of promises and infrastructure investments. The federal government announced major water infrastructure improvements in 2018, promising new treatment plants and upgraded distribution systems. Construction began on treatment facilities designed to handle specific chemical contaminants found in local groundwater, with progress reports through 2021 showing new pipes installed across 60% of the distribution network. But walking through neighborhoods today reveals a different story. The Seveny district received new underground pipes in 2022, but residents report the same metallic taste and chemical odors that plagued the old system. Municipal water officials acknowledge that current infrastructure improvements address distribution problems, but don't eliminate contamination sources in the underlying aquifer system. The contamination runs deeper than most residents realize. Groundwater testing reveals arsenic and phenol violations of WHO standards, while the Blacksmith Institute documented phenol and dioxin concentrations at millions of times safe levels in the White Sea water system. These aren't recent developments. They represent decades of accumulated industrial waste that no amount of pipe replacement can address without tackling the source contamination. Private water delivery has become a thriving economy across the city. Dozens of companies operate trucks that bring filtered water from sources 50 to 200 kilometers outside the contamination zone. Premium services like Aquachisto charge 180 rubles for 19-liter bottles of water processed through reverse osmosis systems and tested for 47 different chemical compounds. Budget options include regional suppliers who truck in basic filtered water for 65 rubles per bottle, though residents report inconsistent quality and occasional chemical odors suggesting incomplete treatment. Neighborhood water cooperatives have emerged as community solutions between expensive delivery services and risky municipal supplies. The Zerzinsk district cooperative pools resources from 234 households to purchase and maintain industrial-grade filtration equipment capable of processing 15,000 liters daily. Members pay monthly fees of 850 rubles and volunteer for maintenance duties, creating community ownership of water security. Similar cooperatives operate in other neighborhoods, though startup costs limit expansion to areas with sufficient households and stable incomes. Small-scale village filtration programs show promise in rural areas surrounding the city. These pilot projects, supported by regional environmental initiatives, demonstrate that localized treatment can achieve better results than city-wide infrastructure upgrades. The 2019 Gazenergostroy contract for environmental cleanup work included provisions for community-scale filtration systems, though implementation has proceeded slowly due to technical challenges and funding constraints. New contamination sources complicate water management efforts as industrial activities shift across the city. The closure of Soviet-era chemical plants eliminated some pollution sources, but remediation work at these sites has disturbed buried waste deposits, releasing contaminants into groundwater systems that were previously stable. Construction of new logistics facilities near the highway corridor required deep foundation work that punctured clay barriers containing industrial waste from the 1970s, with contaminated runoff flowing toward residential water sources. Technological solutions adopted by individual households range from basic carbon filters, costing 3,500 rubles, to sophisticated reverse osmosis systems worth 45,000 rubles, plus annual maintenance contracts. Engineer Viktor Petrov installed a whole-house treatment system combining multiple filtration stages, ultraviolet sterilization, and mineral replacement that processes all water entering his apartment. His monthly operating costs run 2,100 rubles, but independent testing shows his treated water meets international safety standards for all measured contaminants. Community well projects have gained popularity in neighborhoods with access to less contaminated groundwater sources. The Tekstilskik district drilled a 180-meter community well in 2024 that taps into aquifers upstream from major contamination sites. Water testing shows significantly lower chemical concentrations than municipal supplies, though arsenic levels still exceed safety standards. 43 families share well access through a rotation schedule managed by neighborhood volunteers. Climate change adds seasonal complications through groundwater fluctuations and chemical leaching. Rising groundwater levels during wet seasons increase the risk of contaminant migration toward the Volga River basin, while temperature variations affect filtration equipment performance. These climate impacts require additional infrastructure investments that current municipal budgets cannot accommodate without external support. Political battles over municipal water responsibility continue generating controversy between local, regional, and federal authorities. City officials argue that contamination sources predate current administration and require federal environmental cleanup funding. Regional governments claim that municipal infrastructure maintenance falls under local responsibility, regardless of contamination sources. Federal environmental agencies maintain that water quality standards must be met through local efforts while providing technical assistance rather than direct funding. The uncomfortable truth about Zerzinsk's water situation is that measurable improvement remains elusive despite substantial investments and technological solutions. Residents have become experts at managing contaminated water through filtration, delivery services, and alternative sources rather than accessing genuinely clean municipal supplies. But water contamination represents just one dimension of the health challenges facing this community, and the medical data reveals patterns that challenge many assumptions about life in Russia's most contaminated city. The Health Reckoning. Medical Reality Check. Current life expectancy statistics show men living to 64.3 years and women to 71.8 years, representing dramatic improvement from the catastrophic figures documented in 2007, when the Blacksmith Institute recorded male life expectancy at just 64 years and female at 47 years. The gap between Zerzinsk and Russian national averages has narrowed substantially, though residents still face lifespans approximately 6 years shorter than their counterparts in uncontaminated cities. Healthcare infrastructure operates through 2 main hospitals and several district clinics, though the city lacks specialized cancer treatment facilities. Patients requiring chemotherapy or radiation treatments must travel to Nizhny Novgorod or Moscow, often exhausting family savings to cover expenses not covered by federal health insurance. The Central Hospital upgraded its emergency department in 2023 with diagnostic equipment capable of detecting heavy metal poisoning and chemical exposure symptoms, but complex cases still require referral to regional medical centers. Medical records reveal disturbing patterns reflecting decades of environmental exposure. Birth defect rates among newborns run 2.8 times higher than national averages, with particular increases in neural tube defects and cardiovascular abnormalities. Cancer incidence affects 890 per 100,000 residents annually, compared to national rates of 367 per 100,000, with lung, kidney, and liver cancers showing the highest concentrations. A 2013 study documented chronic cough affecting 30.5% of residents living near industrial areas compared to 18% in other locations, illustrating long-term respiratory impacts from chemical exposure. Medical tourism has become a survival strategy for residents requiring treatments unavailable locally. Approximately 2,300 Zerzinsk residents traveled to other cities for medical care in 2024, spending an estimated 180 million rubles on transportation, accommodation, and treatment costs. Cancer patients typically relocate temporarily to Moscow or Nizhny Novgorod for months of treatment, while kidney transplant candidates face particular challenges since environmental exposure often affects potential family donors. Private medical facilities in Moscow have developed specialized programs for Dzerzhinsk residents, offering payment plans and temporary housing assistance for families relocating for treatment. Local medical professionals work under extraordinary conditions, treating patients with complex multi-system diseases rarely seen elsewhere. Dr. Elena Komarova has practiced internal medicine in Zerzinsk for 23 years, describing cases where patients present symptoms affecting liver, kidney, and respiratory function simultaneously, requiring treatment approaches not covered in standard medical training. Nursing staff face emotional challenges caring for patients with terminal illnesses at unusually young ages, including parents dying of cancer while their children show early signs of similar health problems. Staff turnover remains high as young medical graduates complete required service commitments, then relocate to less challenging practice environments. Telemedicine programs launched during the pandemic created limited solutions for medical access. A few remote consultations were trialed in 2022, connecting residents with specialists in Moscow and St. Petersburg, though coverage remains limited due to technical constraints and funding restrictions. Remote monitoring devices track basic vital signs for some patients with chronic conditions, but acute medical emergencies still require immediate local intervention or emergency transport to regional facilities. Mental health impacts reflect the psychological burden of living in a location internationally recognized for environmental disaster. Residents report elevated stress levels related to environmental anxiety and concerns about their children's health prospects. The stigma of living in Russia's most contaminated city creates additional psychological pressure, particularly among parents worried about genetic impacts on future generations. Community support groups have formed to help families cope with chronic illness and environmental health concerns, though professional mental health services remain limited. Local clinics now test for heavy metals in blood and urine samples following WHO protocols, providing early warning of dangerous exposure levels. These monitoring programs help identify residents at highest risk for organ system damage, though treatment options remain limited for advanced cases of chemical poisoning. Home testing kits allow some residents to monitor their own exposure levels, though the cost puts this technology beyond reach for many families. The health crisis narrative surrounding Zerzinsk requires careful examination of current medical reality versus historical reputation. While health outcomes remain significantly worse than national averages, improvements in life expectancy and disease management suggest that environmental health impacts can be partially mitigated through medical intervention and lifestyle adaptations. Residents have developed sophisticated strategies for managing chronic conditions while maintaining functional lives despite extraordinary health challenges. Rather than uniform medical catastrophe, Zerzinsk demonstrates how communities adapt to environmental health risks through enhanced medical monitoring, treatment innovation, and collective support systems. The medical infrastructure, though limited, provides essential services while residents navigate complex healthcare needs requiring both local management and specialized treatment elsewhere. But surviving in this environment requires more than just medical care. It demands economic opportunities that can sustain families while managing extraordinary health costs. The question becomes whether new industries can provide that economic foundation in a city still recovering from its toxic industrial past. Industrial Phoenix. What replaced the chemical plants? Today's Zerzinsk operates through a patchwork of repurposed industrial facilities and small-scale enterprises that bear little resemblance to the massive chemical weapons complex that once dominated the city's economy. The concrete shells of former Soviet manufacturing plants now house an unlikely collection of businesses that would have seemed impossible during the Cold War era. Research confirms that facilities like the former Plast plant, which produced munitions during the Soviet period, have been converted to civilian manufacturing operations, though the transition process has proven more complex than initial planning suggested. Economic transformation efforts have produced modest results through targeted federal programs rather than the major industrial recruitment campaigns that dominated headlines in the early 2000s. Federal small business development programs provided low-interest loans and grants to local entrepreneurs, supporting restaurant owners, retail shops, auto repair services, and construction contractors serving regional markets. These initiatives created several thousand jobs across various service sectors, though most businesses employ fewer than 25 people and focus on local rather than national markets. Tax incentives for businesses locating in designated economic development zones attracted dozens of new companies, but the scale remains limited compared to the massive industrial operations that previously defined the city's economy. The technology sector found unexpected opportunities in Zerzinsk as improved internet infrastructure arrived in 2021, enabling remote work positions that bypass traditional concerns about the city's environmental reputation. Companies established customer service operations and digital marketing offices that serve clients across Russia, while taking advantage of lower operational costs compared to Moscow locations. These positions offer salaries significantly higher than local manufacturing jobs, though they require specialized skills that limit employment opportunities to residents with technical education. Military production facilities that survived the post-Soviet transition have adapted through gradual diversification programs, though the process has faced significant challenges. Research documents that manufacturers of munitions continue operating in the city, including facilities that experienced explosions as recently as 2019, highlighting ongoing safety concerns in the conversion process. The precision manufacturing capabilities developed during military production have attracted some civilian contracts, but employment levels remain substantially lower than during peak Soviet operations. Small-scale manufacturing and service industries have filled economic gaps through entrepreneurial innovation rather than large-scale industrial development. Metal fabrication shops occupy former warehouse spaces, producing custom metalwork for construction projects and agricultural equipment repairs. Textile manufacturing returned through several small companies producing work clothing and fabric goods for regional customers. Auto parts manufacturing expanded as national supply chains sought domestic alternatives to imported components, with companies establishing operations in renovated industrial facilities. These businesses typically employ 15 to 85 workers and generate modest annual revenues while creating stable employment without requiring massive capital investments.